It takes one special person to change the lives of their family, a legend to change the lives of generations to come. I'm Alina Muradyan, and you're watching The One. Today's guest is special, not only because he's my first guest at this show, but also because he's known for being raw, unfiltered, and just genuine with his thoughts, his feelings, and everything else around him. A serial entrepreneur who no longer needs an introduction. I would like to welcome Bedros Keuilian to The One.
Thank you, Alina. It's a pleasure to be here, and I really value the opportunity.
Bedros, you have a lot of followers, a big audience, and I mean it when I say you don't need any introductions.
Thank you.
Let's start from your why. Your family moved here from Armenia.
Yeah. So we moved here in June of 1980, and when we moved to the United States, I was 6 years old, so I didn't really know what was happening, other than I knew we were going on vacation from Armenia to Italy. But we spent 10 days in Rome, Italy, where my father and my older brother went to the American consulate. And for 10 days, they were pumping my dad for information because my dad was a member of the Communist Party. And so once they did that, they let us legally enter the United States. And my dad chose California because it's a warm climate. And so when we came, we're immigrants, we're foreigners, we don't speak English, we don't understand the culture. We're living in Section 8 housing, and we were grateful for all of that. But it was definitely a tough several years until we got our feet under us. Yeah.
So you're growing up, going to school, going to college.
I actually dropped out of college. I went 32 days.
Because I remembered right away when I said going to college, I remember your story that you did drop out.
Yeah.
What was the point where you're like, this is not going to work? And what was the turning point where, and what was your why? What was the reason that?
Well, I guess my big reason why, even before the fitness industry, was I knew I needed to make a lot of money, like early on. We were here for a year, so I was 7 years old. My sister, who's 16 years older than me, had a job at a pizza joint, at a pizzeria. And the owner of that pizzeria was very bad to her. He was very hands-on with her. When she was drinking soda, he would always taste her soda to make sure that it wasn't like 7-Up or Sprite, that it was water. And she would come home crying, and my dad would always say, look, we need all the money we can bring in, so just
How old were you
deal
then?
with it. I was 7 years old.
Wow.
And so I remember hearing that. When you're 7, you're helpless because you can't do anything about it. But I remember going up to my sister and telling her in Armenian that one day I'm going to make so much money, you'll never have to work again. And so about 10, 12 years ago, I got myself to a place in life where I was able to tell my sister to quit her job. By this point, she was working for Delta Dental Insurance Company, and she's been working for me for the last decade. My big reason why was to free my sister from her job, to be able to give really the best way I could show gratitude to my parents for bringing us to the United States, was to make sure that they're taken care of. Their home is paid off. They never have to worry about money, vacations, a driver whenever they need a driver, so they can come out to Glendale, Burbank, etc., Hollywood, visit friends. And so I always wanted to make sure I was the one taking care of them. So I was driven to be the one, and my family was the reason why. The reason I got into fitness is a different story. Because
it's interesting.
That's a really interesting story, because in 11th grade in high school, I was always overweight growing up.
No.
And yeah, believe it or not. and so when our Armenian families feed us great Armenian food, you find yourself overweight, especially if you're not used to working out and exercising and don't understand calories in, calories out. So long story short, 11th grade, I knew prom was coming the following year. And there was this girl that I wanted to ask to the prom, but I knew that if I was in better shape,
you had
she was going
higher
to say yes.
chances.
Exactly, a higher chance. So that motivated me to work out, get fit for an entire year. And I loved it so much, I decided that once I finished high school, I was going to go to college, get my degree in exercise science, and become a fitness coach, a personal trainer. So I dropped out of college in 32 days. It wasn't for me, but I stuck to being a personal trainer. And through a series of great mentors and good advisors, most of them were all my personal training clients because they make good money, so they can afford a personal trainer. So I had built-in mentors. And that allowed me to get business coaching from them. And I was able to then grow an empire through the fitness industry. So that was really my big come up as an entrepreneur.
How did you find yourself in the coaching position? Let's talk about the fitness industry, and then further we'll talk about just overall how you've opened up your expertise to pretty much any business owner, that any entrepreneur that wants to really, really level up.
Yeah, I guess I had a hidden gift and I didn't even know it, because I was able to take people who hated the gym, didn't like working out, didn't like sweating, didn't like the burning of the muscles, and I would make it so fun for them that they would look forward to come back the next day. So I realized I was a good coach. There's a good trainer. A trainer knows how to train someone. A good coach knows how to work with someone's emotions, their feelings, their thoughts.
It's a mindset, mental.
Exactly, to get them come in, to get them to give it their all, and to get them to come back again tomorrow and get the results. And so once I figured that out, I realized, well, now, as I got better in business, opening up several gyms, making those gyms successful, I realized the same skills that I used to take people who were not good at working out and help them get results in fitness, I could coach the same people in business as well. So gym owners who didn't know how to market, didn't know how to sell, didn't know how to create systems, leadership, I made business fun, just like I made fitness fun and entertaining and something that they look forward to. And if you're looking forward to something, you're more likely going to do it than if you're dreading it. And so that's how I started business coaching in the fitness industry. And it got to the point where every year I would run a 3-day event called Fitness Business Summit, 1,500 attendees. I would give away a Land Rover every year to one of my attendees. And it started to build my reputation outside of the fitness industry, because people outside of the fitness industry are wondering, how's this guy doing all this in such a small, tiny industry, the fitness space?
And is this before the social media days?
Oh yeah. Maybe Facebook had just come out by then, but Instagram wasn't big. YouTube was just starting out. So I was doing that since 2007, 2008, 2009. Social media really started to take off 2013, 14, 15. Of course, once social media popped off, it became even easier to fill up these big events. So social media absolutely helped.
Because I feel like your name absolutely exploded the past few years thanks to your podcast.
Yeah.
And like every time I personally share, my friends, and we'll speak about your audience too, but especially women, they always ask me, they're like, oh my God, we didn't know about him. We didn't know about him. And we love his mindset, what he talks about. And I said, I know. And everybody started following. And so I know I'm kind of skipping forward to your podcast, but initially when you were starting your podcast, did you have an audience in mind? Or were you just...
Yeah, that's a good question. My first podcast was the Empire Show. And I did that with my dear friend and business partner, Craig Ballantyne. We would interview each other, or we would interview other entrepreneurs. We did that for 4 years, and I really enjoyed it. I love talking about business. I love talking about fitness. I realized anything I'm passionate about, I can get other people passionate about. But if I'm not passionate about something, I can't get you excited. So I love fitness, I love business, so I kept talking about those two things. But I also noticed that on the Empire Show, when I would just look down at the barrel of the camera and just go off on a topic that was passionate to me, those episodes would just pop off. And so during the pandemic, we stopped filming the Empire Show because Craig lived in Canada and he couldn't come out to the United States. And so we had like a 4 or 5 month period where there was no episodes being put out. And I talked to Joan and I said, Joan, I think I'm feeling called, like I've got to have my own episode, my own show. And I've got to talk about more than just business, more than just fitness. I've got to talk about the mindset, the heart of men, the entrepreneurs, what's happening with our world, why the government is the opposition and they're trying to suppress us. Everything that would have gotten me canceled, I wanted to talk about. And the very first episode, we did it. in October this last year, and it just took off. And I knew that if I could just passionately look down the barrel of the camera and talk about what excites me and how I want to serve humanity and wake them up so that they can become the agent of change in their lives, their families, their community, and then the world, then I'll have made a bigger difference. And that's how that really started.
Bedros, I'm also surrounded by a lot of business owners, just altogether entrepreneurial souls. But I'm also surrounded by people, I'm sure we all have those people in our lives where they feel like they're inspired by the entrepreneurs around them, but they can't make that next step or that changing step to change their life for better. Like I have a lot of conversations around me where, but if I could just overcome this one more struggle, then I won't have any more struggles. Now, the reason I'm asking you this question, my next question, because people feel like you've got it all together. You're running a multi-million-dollar businesses, several businesses, projects. You have your podcast, which is super successful. People love you love your podcast. What would you say, do you still have struggles?
Yes.
Do you still have fears?
Yes.
And what would you say, and I don't like to sit and give advice because a lot of times when people like you give advice to the general audience, there are a lot of skeptics or just people that are a bit more negative. And they say, well, it's easy for him because he's sitting on that couch, he's got everything going, he has his multi-million-dollar business, he has his beautiful family, he has no worries. It's easy for Bedros to sit and say, well, everything is going to be good and just follow this advice or do this and take the next step and man up.
Yeah.
What would you tell, not just men, but just overall people that always constantly have some kind of an excuse that once they come out of that little problem or once they cross that barrier, that struggle, then everything's going to be okay?
The biggest misconception that people have, and this is when people are first starting out, they think that if I can just get over this one more hump, everything's going to be fine. And I'm always the guy that has to deliver the bad news, so I'll deliver it here to your audience as well. And the bad news is the human condition is full of suffering. Is full of unknowns. Because let's say you got over this hump and everything is perfect. Well, if we all have a mom and dad, at some point mom or dad are going to get sick, they're going to pass away, and that creates another problem. If we have siblings, at some point something's going to happen, and that's going to create a problem. If there's marriages in our families, in our lives, there's a 50% chance of a divorce. That's going to create a problem. The human condition is full of problems. It has to be, so that we can develop the muscle of problem solving. Problem solving is a muscle. When people don't solve problems in their life, they begin to accumulate problems. And so I find it interesting that people think that if I could just get over this next hump, everything's going to be fine. That is the biggest lie they tell themselves. Life is dynamic. The only people that have no problems are dead people because they are consistently dead. They're in a very static state. The rest of us, we're alive, we're going to have to deal with problems, solve problems, figure things out, and that teaches us resiliency, the ability to maintain emotional discipline, to have life structure, to have a great group of friends, family who could support us towards our goals or towards when we're going through a struggle, we're not alone. We need struggle, we need suffering, we need uncertainty. Without it, it's not a human condition, and therefore you're probably dead.
True. And I feel like some people also just make excuses because it's just easier to say, it's easier for you.
Yeah.
Or you're built a different way. And I always say that, every person is different. What's meant for Bedros might not be meant for you. And instead of following, just because somebody's life looks better on the outside, trying to just copy them, maybe it's better to just find your own why.
Yep.
And just like you said earlier, when you're passionate about something, things just flow. When you go through difficulties, it's just much easier. Yeah. Going through your entrepreneurial journey while you were still under 21, did you get support from your family? And the reason I'm asking you that, because your family moved here, you were only 6 years old. I'm sure they've seen a lot of struggles, worked many different jobs, and they were probably afraid that they couldn't pamper you in the outside world. And your ideas, from what I understand, were very big. Your vision was very big. How did you deal with that in that family dynamic before you created your own family? Who supported you?
It's funny. Who supported me was me. I supported me. And if there's any message I can give away to this audience is you are your number one cheerleader. And the reason my family didn't support me like I wanted is not because they didn't want to see me win. They were worried for me. They wanted me to play it safe. They didn't want me to experience hardship. However, I knew that I was willing to risk it all, experience hardship, because I knew what I wanted. I wanted to provide my parents with a home that's owned free and clear. I wanted to take my sister out of her job. I wanted to make such incredible amount of money that I could travel the world with my family and give them experiences that I never had as a kid. And for that to happen for my son and daughter, I had to make an obscene amount of money so that I can show them the world when they're babies and growing up into toddlers, et cetera, and teens. And I was able to do that. I knew early on what I wanted, and I knew it would take a lot of risk. And to explain that to my parents, that I'm gonna have a 3-day, 1,500 person event that's gonna cost us over $1 million to produce, one event, and give away a Land Rover that's gonna be parked in the middle of the ballroom. My dad couldn't figure out, one, how are you gonna fill up all the seats? How are you gonna get sponsors? Because I tell him I'm gonna get sponsors, stage, lights, cameras, gonna give away a lamp. Why are you giving away a car, right? And I get it, because his experience of life is very different. He comes from a very different time where owned a little tailor shop in Anaheim, California, and that to him was the American dream. To me, the American dream was doing it all. And so while I didn't get the support I wanted, I learned how to become my number one cheerleader. And I think that's the biggest lesson everyone can take away, is you shouldn't look for external validation. Like, the greatest cheerleader is within.
Yeah, and not because your family doesn't want to support you, but because they just simply cannot see the same vision you have.
Exactly.
Everybody's different, and especially for immigrant families, you know, you see that I'm sure a lot too. They're just so afraid that they cannot protect you in the new step or new world that you're taking on, and that's why they're just afraid now, because they don't want to support you.
You know, it's funny, right? I think I like to think that I'm a pretty educated person, that I'm pretty evolved, that I've got an open mind and understanding. Yet I don't understand why Elon Musk put a Tesla in a rocket and he's sending it off to Mars. Like, my vision isn't big enough to understand why he's sending a rocket with a Tesla vehicle in it to Mars. But to him, it makes sense. That's his vision for life. Like, to him, if he doesn't do that, he's not living life.
I think he wants to have a car to drive there.
That makes sense. Hopefully he can figure out the gravity situation. But you see what I mean, where, you know, my parents, our parents' generation, to them, man, if we can just get away from communism and live a humble life, that's winning. To me, it's beyond that.
Is it safe to say that you were the one in your family that changed the destination for the destiny for them and the destination?
Yeah, and the destination, the destiny and the destination. Yeah, it is absolutely the one. And in fact, I look at my nieces and nephews now; they're all striving for excellence. They're not just going for mediocrity.
Because you set high standards, and you also made them see by example that it's possible.
Yeah,
there is no limit. When people say sky is the limit, I think there is no limit. Period.
There is
no.
Yeah.
I heard a podcast recently, you talked about how important choosing the right partner in life is. Let's talk a little bit about that. You're married, you have two beautiful children. How old are they?
My daughter is 15, my son is 17.
How do you think your children would describe you in a room where you're not present?
They would describe me as intense, goofy, and a normal dad, because I'm normal to them, right? When their friends come over and they see me, and for some reason YouTube and TikTok recommends my videos to their friends, so those kids have me on a pedestal, and I'm sure I'm very different than their dads. And so they see me as very different. But to my kids, they've always seen me as passionate, intense, goofy. I like to crack jokes around my kids. I mean, I can't walk around being intense all day long. I'll have a heart attack and die, right? But when I'm intense and passionate about a topic, I will just crawl through that camera and just choke someone to get them to take action on their life. And so what people see on video, you know, as my son says best, he goes, that's not my dad all the time. Like, he's passionate. So like when I'm talking to my son about weightlifting, we're going bananas in the gym. But when we're driving back home, we're listening to Jack Johnson or some regular soft music that's like got me in a chill state. But I think, again, their view of me is very normal because that's all they know of me.
True.
Yeah.
And that's why it's interesting, because I felt the same way, that, when you're in your own zone, you have that intense energy because you're so passionate about what you're talking about your beliefs. And that's one of the reasons we wanted to get you out of that zone and here where, the audience could get to know a little more behind the scenes of who Bedros is. I wanted to go back and talk a little bit and ask you about why you think that choosing the right not choosing the right partner, but why choosing the appropriate partner for you, and how does that change the difference for a man or a woman?
Yep. I think for anyone who is ambitious, who has a big vision, who has big dreams, there's three things that need to be managed. Number one, who you choose as a spouse. Doesn't matter if you're a man or a woman, who you choose as a spouse is your number one determining factor of success or failure. Number two is impulse control. In other words, are you going to be impulsively reaching for your phone when you should be working, or can you control your impulses and do focused work over a consistent amount of time? And number three is the thoughts that occupy your mind. You have negative self-talk, you're going to produce a negative outcome in life. If you have positive self-talk, you're going to produce a positive outcome. But going back to the number one thing, the spouse that we choose, I always tell men, if you are rescuing a woman from her life of disaster, and whatever that life might be, now she becomes codependent on you. When you're not around, when you have to do focused work, intense work, you have to travel to get work done, she's finding problems to produce to get attention. That's codependence. Men are like that too. Women who choose men who are controlling, who are dominant in a very negative way because their dads were that way, find themselves being limited when they want to create a platform, a YouTube show, a podcast, because these men are insecure and therefore don't want to see them succeed, and therefore limit their growth through either violence or threatening or whatever, arguments, to the point where they just go, forget this, I'm done, I don't even want to do this. And so who we choose as a spouse is either going to be an accelerator of your goals, or it's going to be an absolute failure of your dreams. And it's as simple as that.
Do you think a woman has a bigger impact on a man's life, or vice versa, or you think it's just as equal?
I think a woman has a greater impact, both positive or negative, on a man's life than the other way around. And I'm going to explain why. We are all born from women. So men and women, but I'm going to use men right now, as boys, little babies, we run towards mom. We want mom's security. We want mom's comfort. We want mom's arms around us. And so we are naturally conditioned to want a woman's approval and validation. That's how it is. We're born from a woman, right? And so when a woman realizes that a man needs her validation and her approval and weaponizes that against him, that man is screwed. Whereas the other way around, a woman can say, look, I wasn't born from you. I want to be with you, but only if we can move forward together. But if we can't, when you go to work, I'm going to pack up a moving van and leave. And I've seen that happen many of times.
Is your wife involved in your businesses? And what kind of a dynamic do you guys have at home, outside of home?
Yeah, so my wife is very involved in my businesses. In fact, we literally started one of our first big businesses together, which was a high-tech trainer. It was a software that I created many years ago. And since then, together we found our two different lanes. I do the marketing and selling. She does everything in terms of, in the beginning it was systems and accounting. Now she's just the CFO of all of our companies, because as the CFO, that is the biggest responsibility, to manage all the money into the bank accounts, make sure all the accountants and bookkeepers are doing things right, the CPAs are filing everything correctly. So now she's isolated to, I believe, the most important role, which is the CFO and of all of our companies. And so that, to me, allows me to stay in my lane, she stays in her lane, and it keeps our home relationship still not so much as business partners, because the moment you start feeling like business partners, it takes away the romance from the marriage. But if I know that she's not making any CEO decisions and I'm not making any CFO decisions, And when we get home, we have rules. We're not talking about business. If I want to turn to her at the dining table and ask her a business question, I stop myself and I just email her. That
No
way
way.
she can, right, yeah, she does the same thing because we've gotten into enough arguments at the dinner table.
Because it's so hard to separate it.
Right, because you're both passionate about your business. It's given you such an amazing lifestyle. And now she thinks that you shouldn't take this risk and you think you should, and now you're arguing about it. And how is that night gonna go? Are you gonna have good sleep that night? Probably not. Not when you're laying in bed with your business partner who you just argued with. But if you have rules in place where we're not gonna bring up a topic on a date night, we're not gonna bring up the topic of business after work, at home, around the kids in a time when we're supposed to be at a movies with the kids or miniature golfing or whatever, then it's like, hey, this is normal family time. If I have an idea, I just take out my phone, or she does. I email her, she'll email me, and the next morning we'll handle it. Like we have morning times where we sit together for an hour and go over business. We don't
And
have
it
to,
actually works out.
yeah, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't mean to
But you
interrupt.
have to be structured. The reason most business partnerships where it's a husband and wife don't work out is because they are not disciplined in maintaining a structure of a schedule that's going to help validate their marriage and support the business.
Great. You know, if you guys could make it work, because I know I grew up in a family business. My mom, my dad worked together, and I'm involved in family businesses. And it's so hard to really separate that and enjoy that person at a different capacity. It's almost impossible. So for you guys to make it happen and for that dynamic to work, that's great.
Yeah.
Now, how do your children integrate in all that? Are they involved at any, do you guys involve them in your businesses? Do you see your children continuing what you're doing?
No.
Or are their interests different?
Their interests are different, and I like that. I always tell my son, because my son, he's 17 now. 3-4 years ago, he came to the conclusion that, holy crap, Dad, I have big shoes to fill. I was like, dude, don't feel like you have to fill my shoes. You have big shoes to fill, but that's because you're meant to do big things. You have to figure out what your shoes are. You do have big shoes to fill, but your shoes, not mine. My dad wanted me to take his tailor shop over in Anaheim. And when I told him I don't want to be a tailor, I still know how to hem pants, change a zipper, and all that stuff because he taught me. But I hated it. It was like taking the life out of me every time I did it. And when he was so disappointed when I said I don't want to take over the business. And he said, but I worked my 20 years in this shop just to give this to you. I said, I don't want it. And so my son realizes he doesn't want to deal with the Federal Trade Commission. Like when you're a franchisor like I am, I'm dealing with the Federal Trade Commission, 3 audits a year. Like it is a very big machine.
Of course.
And so we're very open about the good, the bad, and the ugly. Yes, we make a lot of money, but yes, there's a lot of stress. Yes, we have good team members. Without those team members, I would probably end up jumping off a bridge because I couldn't do it all myself. And so my kids get to hear the good, the bad, the ugly. They see that I love the coaching side of the business because I love working with people, solving their problems. I don't like working with the Federal Trade Commission and filling out audit forms. And so I've got attorneys that do that. So they figured out very quickly that they have big shoes to fill and they must fill them, but it's their shoes. And they're both headed in some kind of music and art. And not necessarily entrepreneurship, but they also know they're going to work for themselves because I've taught them early on and they know that if you have a job, and unless you have a job working for someone who is very cool to you, you're going to hate life. And that's like 99% of the time, most people that have a job are working to build someone else's business. That someone else doesn't.
Unfortunately, that's true.
That's a fact, yeah. I'm in a position where I get to work with great people. And I'm in a position where I get to empower my people. I get to give equity to some of my key team members from my companies. But that's a rare type of person.
Any current projects you're working on currently that you could share?
I'm starting to feel the gnawing of needing to write another book. So there is another book in me that's going to come out probably in the next 2-3 years. And beyond that, I just love investing in businesses that I feel that I can help those owners grow, that I support and believe and use the product, and I have the audience to promote the product. So these days I'm taking equity in a lot of companies who I believe in, the owners, the product, and I have the audience to support it because I'm trying to diversify more. Those are really about the new things in my life.
And recently, I was also at the last event I was at. You guys were promoting an event where you help business owners take their business to the next level.
Yes.
And also teach them to invest in real assets like real estate. So I'm assuming you're also heavily investing in the real estate side.
Yeah, especially now as we're starting to see interest rates go up. We're starting to see multi-unit apartments, especially in Detroit, where I'm investing in a lot of apartments right now with my business partner, Tony Steffen. He was a coaching client who ended up making a lot of money, like all my coaching clients do. And he said, what do I do with this money? I said, well, I invest in crypto, I invest in multi-unit, and here's how I do it. He got so good at it that we created a mastermind together where we help entrepreneurs grow their business, and then they take their winnings and they invest it into a syndicate together where we buy apartment complexes. And so that's been a really fun experience, because what I made as a suggestion to Tony for an investment is now helping so many of my clients who aren't going to go out and buy an apartment complex on their own, but they can now invest in a syndicate.
Funds.
In funds, exactly.
You know, as a real estate investor and professional, I think that's the best thing, because we've all seen entrepreneurs make a lot of money, and as fast as they're making it, lose it.
Yeah.
And that's truly one of the biggest and safest investments that you could put the money in, and where I'm getting passionate now because that's my niche. And so that's also really great to have those events to really, this is not even next level, this is taking people to generational wealth where they will be thanking you and blessing you for years and for generations to come. I do have one interesting question for you. You wake up one morning.
Yeah.
And when was it that you felt that Bedros Keuilian is a brand? That, like, where it was just, maybe you were already a brand, but you didn't realize it yet because you're so busy in your daily grind, that one morning, or I don't know, one afternoon, you're like, shit, I'm Bedros Keuilian.
Yeah.
And so many people not only follow me, but I have such a massive influence in today's world, and this is not just United States. We're talking about worldwide.
Global, yeah. So it's funny. I can almost tell you the exact date. It was 2010, and it might have been March of 2010. And the reason I remember that is 2007. I ran my first fitness business summit. There was like 100 gym owners there, 3-day event. 2008, I ran the second one. 2009, third one. By the third one, we had like 600 gym owners there. 2010, we pulled up to the hotel the day before, and people in the lobby were like just looking at me and pointing at me. So the 4th year of running my big event, and by this point, if you look at 2010, Facebook, YouTube has really popped off at this point. Twitter's taken off. I immediately started using blogs and email marketing and Facebook and YouTube to create content. And I realized very quickly that if you can be on that little glass thing that everybody carries around in their pocket, then it is as good as being on TV. Like, they will see you as a star. And so I put myself on there because anyone can. And in the first 3 years, it was just, I was a guy running seminars. The 4th year, because I was able to spend 12 months manufacturing celebrity, and I realized that I've manufactured celebrity. By doing that, I walked into the lobby and everyone's like, holy shit, you're him, we're here to see you, I can't wait till tomorrow when it starts off. And then the bell guy who has all my luggage, he goes, sir, we're gonna take you through the kitchen of the restaurants. They took me to the kitchen, through the service elevator to my room, because there was people by the elevators waiting to talk to me. And I was excited for it, but I also needed to get to my room to prepare for the next morning. So once I started being escorted through the bellies of buildings, I realized like things have changed. Like, I've developed a brand, and today, like, literally anywhere I go, I just get noticed and spotted. And I love that, because I think when people see someone they look up to and they go, hey, I met him and he's normal, 2 arms, 2 legs, goofball of a human, then they see that there's potential. Like, I had never met a millionaire until I met Jim Franco, my personal training client, and I thought millionaires walked on clouds or something. And this guy was just a 65-year-old goofball, and he'd walk around dancing in the gym, and I realized he's no different than me. And all of a sudden it made becoming a millionaire attainable, real. Previous to that, I just figured they were like unicorns or something. There was something magical about them, and I didn't have that. So I think it's very important for us to get in front of the Queen of England. Before she died, she said something. She said, the Queen must be seen to be believed, because they kept asking her, you're in your 90s, how come you're still going out and doing events and parades and shaking hands of dignitaries? She said, the Queen must be seen to be believed. And I believe that's important. We must be seen in public and not just on a platform.
Now, with all the good that the popularity brought you, I'm sure you've had some negative experiences too.
Sure.
Any life threats, any threats, any hate messages?
There's YouTube channels dedicated to hating me. There's a blog that's dedicated to hating me. Yeah, of course.
Well, hating what you speak for, probably.
Yeah, and I'll get a fair share of death threats. If I'm traveling and I'm speaking at a big event, we'll have security. Because you never know if someone is going to make good on a threat. But to me, all of that is worth that exchange. And so, there's always precautions I take. I rarely, if I travel alone, I'm not posting anything until after I've left an event. If I'm having taken a group of people to dinner, I ask them not to post and not to put any content up. So there's precautions we take, but to me, it's worth the trade-off.
You get a lot of criticism for the MDK project. From the outside, it looks very harsh.
Yeah.
It looks very unhumane. And so I want to talk a little bit about that. I don't.
Sure.
Because men that sign up for the project, they volunteer to make a change in their life where they're fed up with their own BS, they're fed up with their own lives, and they're fed up with maybe even not being able to provide the lifestyle for their family that they feel like they could. I think it's an absolute pity when a man does not use his potential to, first of all, provide for himself. And we're not talking about just finances, but to be his best version. And that's where everything just kind of shifts in an unhealthy way.
Exactly.
So people, men specifically, come and sign up for the project. Talk a little bit briefly about what they go through and what you see, the transitions, positive and negative, of course, know?
So that's a really good question. So like I said, in 2016, 17, I saw that men were being dismantled and being told that they're toxic. And that was leading to men feeling anxious, depressed. Suicide rates went up across every generation of men. Didn't matter what kind of high-risk job they had, what age group they fell into, what nationality they were, suicide rates went up. That only accelerated in 2020 and beyond. So in 2019, we created the project, and I knew, because I've gone through therapy. Look, I was sexually molested as a kid growing up. We came to this country and I was beat up and had to fight off gangs in Santa Ana, some of the most violent gangs. I was told to go back to my own country, that my parents were taking away great American jobs. So I was abused for as long as I could remember. And with that, you end up developing limiting beliefs. You end up creating a glass ceiling in your potential, in your ability to love, in your ability to lead, to make money, to impact lives, to have significance. And so at 38 years old, I had a big panic attack, and that led to me working with a psychologist, a therapist. And while I thought he was just going to give me tools to cope with my anxiety, we ended up spending 15 months deep diving into my childhood and really figuring out what all the things were that I was self-sabotaging myself. I was using Vicodin to go to sleep every night, like handfuls of Vicodin to go to sleep, because I couldn't sleep. My mind would always race. I'd wake up and I'd take a whole bunch of Adderall to wake up. But all this to say that I was one of those guys who was anxious, depressed, felt like there was no purpose for me. I'm just stuck on a hamster wheel.
And this is in your late 30s.
Yeah. And that led to a massive anxiety attack. Thank God I went and worked with the therapist. And the only reason I worked with the therapist is because the doctor gave me Xanax, and that made me so drowsy that I couldn't get any work done. So after 5 days of taking Xanax, I said, I'm not interested in that.
And this is while you're running your businesses,
Yes.
your empire.
So could you imagine, like you're just picturing your empire falling apart. So I told the doctor, I said, I don't want to take Xanax. What's my other option? He said, well, you might want to consider working with a therapist. So I went and worked with a therapist. That led to doing a deep dive into my childhood and everything else. And all of a sudden, I was able to realize that I have greater potential, far better purpose in life, that I was meant for more, and that I wasn't broken, I wasn't unlovable, all those things that I felt. And all of a sudden, depression and anxiety goes away. And I realized so many men are suffering like that, but they're not willing to go work with the therapist. But if I can take some of the exercises that my therapist taught me, journaling exercises, and bake it into a 75-hour experience where they're working with the Navy SEAL, and they're working with the Marine, they're learning how to shoot, how to fight. So everything guys want to do, but we're also wrapping that up with therapy, right, healing, that I think we're onto something. And so we tested the first class. So one of my instructors is a Navy SEAL, the other one's a Marine, the other one is a professional shooter, former SWAT guy, MMA fighter.
And this is within 75 hours?
All
75-hour program?
75
So 3
hours
days?
straight. 3 days.
Pretty much.
Yeah, they're with us, we're with them, no one sleeps.
And just so people know, basically you guys are out in the wilderness.
Yeah. We use my gym, we use the ocean, we use the hills, we go not camping, but hiking several times. So we use every element to give them physical, mental, emotional torture, but it is to break them down because men must be broken down to be built back up. That is the way of man. And so while on social media, it looks very violent, very scary, very, it looks like we're very
harsh.
harsh.
You know? Yeah.
It looks like we're insulting them, and we are.
And these are people that pay to be there.
Yeah, they pay $12,000 to $15,000 a piece to be there. But the healing that they experience, the growth, the brotherhood, the new purpose that they develop is unmatched. Like I've got 9 letters in my office of men who came to the project and graduated and said, had it not been for the project, I would have killed myself. Like that's impact.
I know that recently you established another program where it's geared towards fathers and sons.
Yeah,
Did that program come after, and what was, how did you come up with that program?
Yeah.
Was it kind of like the baby program of the MDK
kind of was,
project, or?
So here's really what happened. Right now we've run 16 classes of the project over the last 4 years. About 5-6 classes in, the guys that were graduating the project kept telling me, man, if I had something like this when I was smaller, when I was a kid, I would have had a very different life, a better life. I wouldn't have messed up my marriage. I wouldn't have messed up my business. I wouldn't have had my addictions. And so you keep hearing that over and over again. I said, well, what if we were to create something like that, where fathers and sons can go through it together for 12 hours, not 75. It's way less harsh. And historically, for thousands of years, boys have been given a rite of passage into manhood by their dads and by the men that those dads trust. That has stopped over the last couple hundred years, and we see why boys are confused. They don't know what their role and responsibility is as a young man. And so we brought back that rite of passage experience for boys, and their fathers take them through the experience, and it is life-changing.
The programs that you have, and recently, I think it's been a year or 2 years you wrote the book? Or is
Man
it,
Up, yeah.
Man Up. How did you come up to that stage? Was it after, how you said in your late 30s you had depression and then you had to come out of it yourself? Did you write the book after that?
Yeah, after I did a lot of healing and discovered my new self, the 2.0 self, the higher self, the more evolved self, I realized there was 6 pillars that I had to focus on in life. If I could just focus on 6 pillars in my life and my business, that I would be like perfect in every category. And once you realize it's not a lot of things, 6 things that you need to focus on, I wanted to share it with the world. And so I wrote my book, Man Up. And the reason I wrote Man Up is when I realized, after working with the therapist, that I needed to have a hard conversation with a business partner, I didn't want to have that conversation. So I kept encouraging myself, dude, man up and do it. Just man up and do it. I would have this self-conversation. I would tell myself, man up and do it. man up and do this, man up and do that. So the title of the book naturally became Man Up for that reason. And ever since I wrote the book, so many men and women have read it, tens of thousands, and they tell me that, you know, they just apply those 6 pillars into their life and their life is better. When they don't, their life goes back to shit. So it's easy enough to figure out.
That's absolutely true. And one last question. Is Bedros getting ready to retire anytime soon?
No. I'll never retire. I'll die working. To me, retiring is accepting death early on. And the reason is I'm very self-sabotaging. And so the moment I stop working, I will now have time on my hands
To find all the problems that
find the
you have in your head.
and then to get addicted to some drugs, and you'll find me dead in a gutter. And so, and it doesn't matter if I'm 48 like I am now, or if I'm 98 like I'm going to be when I die. I'll always be working. I'll always be serving humanity.
You're financially able to retire if you want to.
Correct. Yeah.
And a lot of people also look at, I guess it wasn't the last question, I lied, but I do want to ask you something. Money, making a lot of money, having businesses, a lot of people look at it as a negative thing.
Yeah.
Like,
I never
you just want to
understood
make
why.
money, you just want to, in reality, your association with making money, I know, is financial freedom. And today you've achieved it. Anything that, like, what would your message be to people that have that negative association with making money? We were always brought up thinking that, no, if somebody is wealthy, then they're bad people. Now, I know that concept doesn't exist anymore, but then also people that are not able to attain financial freedom always talk to their children in a negative
Exactly.
aspect about money.
About money and about the people that make money. And look, it's like this. If there's a dad who is out of shape and there's a dad in the gym who's about the same age who's in great shape, the dad who's out of shape is going to find something negative to say to his son about that guy who's in shape. Well, he must take steroids. That's why. Okay, he can take all the steroids in the world. If he doesn't eat right and work out consistently for decades, he's not going to be in shape. But he'll use that as a fact that, well, he takes steroids, that's why. So we'll always find something to complain about when we don't have that thing. And so when people have very low money intelligence, they begin to hate money. They begin to say money doesn't buy happiness. In fact, money does buy happiness. And I always tell people, if you don't believe money buys happiness, you haven't given enough of it away.
True.
Because I give so much money away to Shriners Children's Hospital, Toys for Tots, and Compassion International every year. 100% of my speaking fee goes to my charities that I believe in. Makes me feel so good when we donate 7 figures a year to these charities. Makes me feel so good that when there's a GoFundMe for someone who needs a heart transplant, or a Navy SEAL friend of mine who killed himself, that I could help his family out. I'm not the guy that's going to stand here with my arms crossed and go, man, somebody should help them. I'm the guy that will help them, because money solves the problem of not having money, and that's a really good problem to solve. And so it's only people who are money ignorant, who hate the concept of money and hate the people who make money. Those who have financial intelligence realize that money is a very important key to creating freedom, opportunity, access, blessing others. And so I will keep making an obscene amount of money and doing a lot of good with it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Keep speaking your truth. Thank you for being so raw today. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing your energy, your time. I really appreciate you. I appreciate what you're doing for everybody around you. And I want to thank, since I have the opportunity, thank you for doing the podcast. Really, I personally know people that it changed their lives.
That means a lot. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.